So as the broadband industry continues to evolve, service providers like you are not just focused on building networks. You're building the futures of communities you serve. Standing out in the BEAD application process requires more than just technical excellence. It's about creating a blueprint for networks that not only connect, but also protect and empower communities. So joining me here today, we have our esteemed panelists, Amanda and Andre. Would you both like to take a quick moment and introduce yourselves?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Amanda Molina. I am the Vice President of Business Advisory and Grant Services for JFI.
Hey, thanks, Shapur, and hi. Thanks, Amanda. My name is Andre Vieira, and I'm on the Calix product marketing team. And I focus every day on helping service providers like you achieve your business goals and overcome your business obstacles and really help you connect your subscribers to their broadband services and your communities to the world.
All right, thank you very much. So in today's webinar, we'll explore how to craft a BEAD-compliant network that goes beyond the basics. So we're going to start off with a detailed analysis of the BEAD timelines, updates, and lessons learned, critical insights into the network engineering and operational considerations essential for BEAD-funded projects, and lastly, security measures that not only allow applications to stand out, but also broadband businesses to keep the communities they help build safe. So to kick things off, let's start off with a quick poll question here. So as we're getting that started, so I'm just curious to learn what is your biggest challenge with the BEAD application? Is it understanding scoring strategies, network design and compliance, BABA, meeting funding matching requirements, cybersecurity and supply chains, feasibility studies? What do you guys feel is the biggest challenge right now? All right, can't see the results.
We'll give it just a few more seconds to gather a few more responses.
Perfect.
There you are, Shapur, your results are out.
Can't seem to see them.
All right, we have a winner with meeting funding match requirements with 32% of the vote.
Okay, cool. That is good to know. And what came in?
Second.
Go ahead. So it was
Network design and compliance.
Aha. Okay, got it. Thank you all for your.
Yeah, we're going to cover that today for sure. So
exactly. Hopefully, we can answer some of those questions for you. So to kick things off, Amanda, let's start with I guess the kind of like where we are now with BEAD. I know the program is making some tremendous progress these past few months, and I know there's been a lot of eyes on this program recently too. So would you be able to shine some light on that?
Sure, I'd be glad to. I think I'm going to just start with a quick disclaimer. So we all are well aware that there's been a change in administration. And that in itself was going to go ahead and lend a few questions and some minor uncertainty. Just yesterday, late yesterday, there was, following the executive orders that have come out, Office of Management and Budget released a memo. So there is a temporary pause of agency grant, loan, and other financial assistance. So that memo is rather broad. Not defined very well right now, and I know that there's a lot of activity. Anywhere that you look today, you're going to see some comments and opinions on this. Here at JSI and Calix, we're monitoring this. We're talking with the industry folks, and right now there is a tremendous amount of uncertainty. So our suggestion and recommendation to you is, until there is something concrete, any existing deadlines or the things that you would go ahead and follow in relation to what your state is requiring specifically as related to BEAD for pre-application and things like that. And as soon as we have some concrete information, Calix and JSI will be definitely reaching out to everybody and sharing what that looks like and what that means to you. So that was my disclaimer before I start talking about BEAD timelines and milestones, which we've been talking about for pretty much 3 years. And so things are starting to move, although there's a temporary pause. We don't know what that's going to be, but wanted to go ahead and provide the framework of, what this looks like, kind of where we're at and where you can expect to go. So one of the big hangups for a lot of states on why they haven't moved forward and actually turned up the BEAD competitive application program is because they are waiting on NTIA approval of the final BEAD serviceable locations, which are what you actually receive funding for BEAD. So your state, although they may go ahead and do a pre-application or potentially start an application phase, cannot go ahead and finish and close out any of the competitive grant rounds until they have that approval. Once they have that, typically that's when the state broadband offices are running that competitive grant process. And there are some states that will have, just one round in a negotiation. There are some states that have teed it up that they're going to have multiple. And that's something that it does vary by state. It is identified in your volume 2, and there's a lot of information at your broadband office. If in doubt, then go ahead and reach out to your favorite friends at Calix and JSI, and we'll be glad to help you understand just what you're looking at for that. Once the competitive grant process actually continues and completes, the state broadband office will publish the provisional awards, and that's going to be open for public comment for 14 days. So everyone will be able to see potentially who the state wants to award to based on scoring and merit and requirements tied to those applications. Upon completion of the publishing of provisional awards and the closeout of the comment period, the state broadband offices are then going to go ahead and bundle that into a package, which is identified and called the final proposal, consisting of several documents and uploads, and they're going to provide that to NTIA. NTIA has to approve that, and then they pass it on to the Secretary of State that also approves, and then you will be notified from your state broadband office that that process is complete, and everyone can go ahead and actually move forward with starting to execute grant award documents and pursuing letter of credit and things like that. So that's kind of where we're at. We're really just getting into the weeds of this right now. So this is the process. This is what you can look forward to as things stand now. Next slide. So the one thing about BEAD is lately it's always changing. So of course we did this map to show you the status, and right after we did it, things have changed. So Oklahoma is getting ready to turn up, Illinois is, as well as Minnesota. They should be green on this map. That happened after we published and closed. One of the things I want to go ahead and really kind of make note of is the provisionally awarded. And so you're going to notice that Nevada, Louisiana, and Delaware are all like a different shade of purple or burgundy. So those 3 states have actually completed the entire grant program. And as of last week, NTIA and the Secretary have approved those provisional awards. That said, now Louisiana, under the new administration, their governor has said, well, we may want to tweak just a couple things with that. So as much as things stay the same, they are still changing. And that's where it is really important to kind of stay engaged, understand where you're at and what's coming. That said, if you operate in multiple states, you can see there's still a tremendous amount of opportunity in state application rounds that have not opened at all. So plenty of time to go ahead and look and see if pursuing BEAD makes sense to you and your company and your future plans. Next. So as I teed up, as much as things are outlined and have been defined under the NTIA NOFO, I think there are a lot of things that people look at that are subject to interpretation. And you can see some of that in the actual, interpretation that the states and territories had of the BEAD NOFO. They all had that same NOFO that they read, but these programs are being structured and run quite differently. Significant clarification that was provided by NTIA came out 2 days before Thanksgiving last year. And so there are still some state broadband offices, because they've already built their portal for their BEAD applications, that are trying to figure out how to incorporate this. And this is one that so far has been impactful to almost everyone that I've talked to regarding BEAD. And it's related to eligible locations. When the challenge process actually went through, the states and NTIA had to pick a fixed and finite point in time to say, okay, is this a valid location? Is it eligible or is it not? Things change from that fixed and finite point in time. People have continued to grow and expand their broadband networks, which means some of those locations may have already had fiber built to them. Yeah, they're still showing as BEAD eligible. Other locations may have been awarded like a Reconnect 5 grant or other state grants, and now have an enforceable commitment that happened after that. And then again, if you have facilities in place, and just because you don't serve that customer now, if you could serve them within 10 days, that location itself would count as served. So you want to make sure that you're looking at this. And in this guidance, NTIA said, these are the specific things, states, that if they happened, these events happened after we established these are the BEAD serviceable locations, you need to give people an opportunity to submit and file to say these should be non-BEAD locations. And the reason you want to do this, and you don't want to just submit a BEAD application asking for 0 grant dollars, is because all of those locations that are identified through the BEAD grant funding process are subject to the Build America, Buy America requirements that are out there, which Andre is going to talk about a little bit more, as well as NEPA. So, I mean, when you already have facilities in the ground, it's a little bit hard to go back and say, all right, well, let's go through the environmental review process. So these are all things to go ahead and consider so that you can have locations that you can serve actually removed from BEAD eligibility. Again, because that was released kind of later in the game, states are handling this differently. And I gave a couple examples of this, and there are plenty more, because again, states are taking this and they're handling it differently. Georgia is saying, hey, give us a template, give us your proof. If they're asking, for example, for a network diagram, you can file that confidentially, but you are going to have to substantiate that you do in fact have facilities or have an existing enforceable funding commitment that should require those locations to be removed from BEAD. For Virginia, they're actually running their grant program. They are in the middle of it. So they're going to have a de-obligation phase at the end by which you would go ahead and do that proof. And then there are some states that are saying, do this. It's a part in the portal with your actual BEAD application to upload. So again, understanding how your state is handling this. And if you haven't seen anything on that, go ahead and reach out to your broadband office and just say, hey, how are you guys handling this? And are you aware that it's happening? Again, it came out to the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, so I think that did get lost in the shuffle for just a few folks. Next. The next thing that came out, and that actually was our bright, shiny New Year gift, is the clarification from NTIA on awarding BEAD to alternative technologies. And, one of the things for BEAD, they had determined that satellite was definitely not a priority. Fiber projects have always been the priority for BEAD. And then moving into some licensed fixed wireless and coax, or, a hybrid combo of some of those elements. The satellite providers have been named in almost everyone's volume 2 as being eligible for locations that nobody bid on that are showing as BEAD eligible. NTIA has since released guidance and a pretty complex flow chart to go ahead and have the states walk through this and see, is this hitting the extremely high cost per location? Should this still be a location that is eligible for, fiber, or is it served by an unlicensed fixed wireless? Can that unsubsidized unlicensed fixed wireless provider provide speeds that, would render the location BEAD eligible otherwise? So it's an entire flow chart to go ahead and walk through. So something to consider as you're looking at an area, whereas, previously, anything that was an unlicensed fixed wireless, would definitely be available. If it doesn't exceed the extremely high cost location per location amount now, that is something that, you may not be able to go ahead and get funding for. So just knowing there is an avenue for alternate technologies to be awarded BEAD. And in the states that have closed out, for example, Louisiana and Nevada, there were awards that went to Amazon Kuiper and another satellite provider. And those represented about 3.2 and 3.6% of the funding and the locations that were eligible through the state. So I think, again, there is, an element to that has been, rolling out. yet another thing that a lot of folks kind of have comment and questions about, hence NTIA's updated guidance in this Appendix A. Next. So I've mentioned a little bit about there are 3 states now that have actually completed their BEAD applications and, awarded these BEAD grants to folks. And, as we helped people walk through these, what we have encountered are a few things and some lessons learned. So, if we can share that with you and help kind of eliminate a little potential strife and provide some clarity as you're considering going for BEAD, that's the goal and the purpose here. So we did talk a little bit about broadband serviceable locations. And again, just really understanding, what is showing as available. Can you serve it? Do you serve it? Should it be BEAD eligible? The other part to that is so many people, again, we've been looking at these maps and talking about this so long that they've already, created a design, hey, we're going to need this much in funding, and they're ready for BEAD. And it's great to be prepared. However, every instance so far that we have seen where the states have submitted the final determination of what location should be BEAD eligible, and then NTIA came back with the approved version, there has been a difference in those 2 files. And there have been many cases where locations that were previously not showing as BEAD eligible under the state now are, and then locations that were key potentially to some folks' designs as they're going in are no longer showing as BEAD eligible. So just understanding what those final broadband serviceable locations look like, and while you do want to go ahead and do a little bit of work ahead, you want to have some flexibility in that design and really kind of think about, where do you need to come in, and if some locations went away, would that be a deal breaker for you from, a financial and or a network expansion capacity. The other part is the applicant eligibility. And, what I mean by this, there are a significant number of the states and territories that have a pre-qualification or gating criteria element to it. And the states and territories are calling this different things. You may see it referenced as a request for information, a letter of intent, pre-application, pre-qualification, and even just gating criteria. The key thing to think about when you see this is those requirements, and in some cases it's like answering a small questionnaire. In some cases it's almost like doing a mini grant application to ensure that you are going to be approved to apply for BEAD. But there's a window that has an open date and a close date, and you need to be cognizant of that. We've had a few folks that were kind of on the fence waiting to see what these locations, the final locations, looked like to see if they wanted to pursue BEAD, and they waited a little bit too long, and that gating criteria window has already closed. And if you do not apply and get approved in that window, you don't get to apply for BEAD. So then you're looking at, you're going to have to partner with somebody that did submit their gating criteria and were approved to submit a BEAD application. So just be cognizant of where you're at. We've had, again, a couple folks that were on the fence, and you may be submitting, you may find yourself actually submitting pre-qualification or qualifying elements to pursue BEAD when you're not 100% sure that you're going after it. So sounds a little odd, but if you're on the fence, leave that door open, go ahead and submit that information so you are giving yourself the opportunity to actually qualify for and be eligible to pursue BEAD. The next big one is the financial considerations. So I know, people have been talking again for quite some time about the requirement to either provide a letter of credit or a statutory performance bond. Again, you don't actually provide those full final documents until the provisional awards are awarded and you're executing the grant itself. However, when you're submitting the application and or the pre-application, in some instances, the state broadband offices are saying, well, give us a commitment letter from your financial institution saying that they will commit to, providing that letter of credit to you if or as awarded. Similar letter that would come from your insurance company for the statutory performance bond. There are some things to go ahead and know and really understand about this. your financial institution and your insured is not going to go ahead and just issue those letters lightly. In some cases, if you're looking at some of the larger financial institutions, even are saying, if you want a commitment letter of credit to submit with your pre-qualification or your application, we need to see your financial pro forma, and we need that 3 weeks in advance of when you're going to go ahead and submit your application. So thinking of this from a timing perspective, if you only have a 30-day grant application window, that doesn't leave you much time. Again, kind of going back to, what's the pre-work, starting to tee stuff up. And then from the performance bond side, they're looking at your total company financials. And if you go to them with a project that is, a $50 million or $60 million project, they may go ahead and look at your financials and say, we're not going to issue you a performance bond for that much. We'll only issue you a performance bond for 20, and I'm saying thousand, it should be million, but 20 million instead of the 50 million based on your financials. So understand where you're at financially. Know if you're going to go the route of the letter of credit or performance bond, and start talking with the person that is your insurance company or your financial institution to determine what they are going to be asking from you, so you are prepared to move forward. And then the last part of this is the engineering considerations. So this is not a light lift at all. The states are wanting to know that when you are asking for millions and millions of dollars, that you have the engineering and technical know-how to actually construct, this network diagram, the true network. You have all the elements, you'll have sufficient backhaul, and you have all of this documentation that you're going to be required to build. There's additionally the weather hardening environmental aspects to it that are things that you're answering and you're providing that wouldn't have been part of a prior grant. Taking just that step further, some of the states are operating where they have a fixed price or a cap per location passed in order for you to submit for a BEAD application for an area. So not only are you engineering a network, which you're always going to do this in the most cost-effective manner, but as it's engineered, is that financially going to go ahead and mirror or meet and be at or below that threshold that is determined by some of these states? So understanding if there's a project cap and all of the elements that are required for engineering, and getting that certified professional engineer, and then all of that on top of it has to be engineered in a manner that it is going to be a secure network. So you need your cybersecurity plan and things like that. And again, Andre's going to talk to you a little bit about more about that, but these are a significant number of factors that are tied to the engineering part of it, whereas prior grants that you may have applied for would have been just a little bit of a lighter lift. And I think with that, I am turning it over to Andre.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and really appreciate getting insight in terms of BEADs and the lesson learned on serviceability and the application process and eligibility, and obviously engineering. I think the one thing we can highlight for everyone is there are so many questions, and we're seeing a lot of questions coming. I know from my friends in service providers and the state officials that are administering BEAD, because there's a lot of ability to just learn about a process or learning about deploying and funding a network. What I'm going to talk to you about here is talk about the BEAD infrastructure and the network and the considerations that you can think about building that. And the way to preface that I'm starting that discussion here is really the way I like to think about things, which is looking at a framework. And that framework that you're looking at here is the service provider operating model. And if you're going to be working with BEAD or any type of funding project, or as a service provider itself, it's important to take a step back and look holistically at the network in terms of how you're offering services and how you're delivering value to your subscribers and your customers. If you think about it that way, it'll make the process a lot easier. At a high level here, just to describe these areas, we have high level funding and design, which happens early on in the project, and then the build part of the network where you actually implement and build the infrastructure, the outside plant, deploy the network, and then you move to the operations side of it, where you're actually operating and providing services and performing customer support for yours and doing marketing and so forth. And typically the operation and the marketing side happens continuously throughout the lifespan of the network itself. So think about the build and design part of the network is the one time up front, happens multiple as you add your network, but you're going to be operating this network for 10, 15 plus years. So you're going to be spending a lot of time in operating and marketing that network. So it's very important you understand, as Amanda mentioned earlier, about making sure that you're deploying solutions that are financially sustainable. Now, one of the things I wanted to do here was overlay the BEAD project considerations over this. So if Shapur, you can talk about that. As you can see, and Amanda touched on these, like the map challenge, the application process, and the award. That's just the beginning of the process. But as you move on to the final decision and getting the award, you have to finalize that design that you submitted to the state in terms of your application, and also start building the outside plan in the network. So I'll be touching on that, and then finally talk about considerations with BEAD overlaying this infrastructure in terms of service delivery, compliance and reporting, and also cybersecurity and supply chain. So with that, we can move to the next slide. Okay, so first I wanted to, because there was questions earlier in the survey, I think this is an important topic, is talk about what is this BABA preference, or what's called the BEAD program Buy America preference. And it's really, in a nutshell, it's about, you know, this program or BEAD program is a federally funded program. And Congress, a few years back before the BEAD, you know, Infrastructure Act, passed the Buy America, Build America Act. It's for any federally funded program must have domestic content in it. So think about, I think you hear about a lot of these in the news. You hear about building bridges and putting in infrastructure for, you know, the infrastructure for our roads and also infrastructure for electric power and so forth. You hear about using America made steel, concrete, and cables. What's a similar type requirement for the BEAD program? I mean, the challenge that we face is unlike, you know, concrete and steel, and a lot of those things are built in the U.S. and are fundable or available. The program or there is a global marketplace for infrastructure, optical cable, and components and so forth. And that's the challenge, right? For if you think about fiber and cable, over the years before this program, there's been an ecosystem and to develop economies of scale to support building these projects or these type of products all over the world. So it's exciting, that's exciting. But what happens is you really need a waiver, and that's what was issued back in February of 2023, because of the fact that there isn't sufficient quantities to be built in the US or to build up that infrastructure to support this type of project and use the funding in a reasonable amount of time. It would take too long to develop this infrastructure for the network. So that's why there was a waiver to the Build America, Buy America preference that was issued by the NTIA in collaboration with, you know, the industry and a number of different industry players as part of the Department of Commerce. And that waiver really says, hey, for these type of infrastructure, there will be waivers placed on that. So let me give you a sense for that, right? There are different categories for this. Construction material and optical fiber in fiber optic cable are not waived, and some part of that needs to comply with BEAD. Manufactured products like electronics, especially optical equipment like optical line terminals and those type of things, are not waived. Fixed access, non-fiber electronics, enclosures, and passive components do have a limited waiver and are part of this waiver for compliance requirements, mostly from the standpoint of being able to be assembled and or manufactured in the United States. As part of this waiver, the manufacturers have to self-certify with the NTIA, and that self-certification is a letter that the executives of these companies sign that says, hey, we comply with this waiver, limited waiver, and any components that are required to be built in America are. And they do this from the standpoint of if they're signing their life away. If they don't comply, then those executives face imprisonment. Anyway, the report really, the idea here is that this information will be reported on a standpoint from a vendor perspective in terms of what we build, but really the obligation to report that you are buying Buy America preference components really falls on you as either the sub-guarantor or the guarantor, which is the state, of being able to make sure that you are complying and using components that are Build America, Buy America, and meet that preference. That's number one. And obviously the vendors issue letters of what equipment complies with that. And for example, Calix, and we can share the link, has a site that shows, hey, what components that we manufacture or build and supply that comply with the Buy America, Build America preference. So the last thing that I wanted to mention here real quick is that you're also required to report any components that you buy that are waived, but that have and include foreign sources. So if you think of a electronic component that doesn't fall into the categories, like a router, for example, you will have to show or at least provide to the state, and the state has to collect this and provide this to the NTIA and federal government that says, hey, these components, I purchased them, I'm using them for the BEAD funded project, and they're built in this country, and they'll have to source that. So that information, you'll need to get that from the different vendors where you purchase this from. So hopefully that helps. Next slide. Yeah, thank you so much, Shapur. So one of the other things I wanted to highlight here is what are the BEAD project obligations besides the Buy America, Build America, Buy America preference, and that falls into three specific obligations as a provider and someone who's receiving an award for BEAD funded projects. The first one is network capacity, and that is you have an obligation to meet minimum capacity, which I believe is 100 megabits downstream, 20 megabits upstream for the service, and other latency requirements. And also your network needs to have a certain reliability, and choosing the right technology for that would make sure that you meet those requirements, plus the reporting aspect of that. You need to take that into account. The other one is you have a deployment requirement, which Amanda touched a little bit on, in terms of being able to meet deadlines and have a schedule and make sure that you meet obligations around the benchmarks that are in place in order to make sure you meet the deployment requirements to utilize the funding during the funding period, but also deploy the network and have it ready to deliver services to your subscribers. So it's very important, that part of it. And then finally, there is an obligation for service beyond deploying the network, which I talked about is important from a financial sustainability standpoint, to make sure that that you have offered these affordable and low cost plans and they're accessible, and also to make sure that you market those plans and make them available to potential subscribers or homes passed in your serving area under the BABA compliance, or I'm sorry, under the BEAD program. And also there's cybersecurity requirements and supply chain risk management requirements for the application and ongoing, and other type requirements as you move forward. But really the key takeaway here is to stay focused and select a solution that's going to make it easy for you to meet these obligations, because these are additional obligations placed on you by the funding. But at the same time, you know, given limited resources, you need to be accelerate and be fast and deploy things quickly. And you want to make sure that you make it easy for yourself as you move and deploy your network. Next slide. So Shapur, yeah, thank you, Shapur. So next, I wanted to talk about the considerations before I talk about the electrical systems and the network itself. I wanted to talk about the outside plant, or the outside optical distribution network, and talk about the fiber deployment. I suspect most of you are going to be deploying fiber, and as Amanda mentioned, that is the preferable technology of choice. And there's a number of reasons for that, right? Fiber is going to be the most reliable. It's going to give you the long-lasting capacity that you need at the lowest cost per bit, and give you the ability to support the obligations that are being asked for in the requirements. And really, as part of that, the most capital-intensive part of this is the construction and meeting the environmental regulations. And that's one of the reasons, if you think about why these areas were underserved and unserved territories to begin with, right? We've had service providers in place for multiple years, for centuries, but they haven't deployed into these areas because of the challenges of deploying out networks and making that financially sustainable. So it's very important that you look at the economics of that, even as you receive funding to support that, and look into that carefully. And really, that's what this investment is intended to do, is to overcome this initial hump in terms of being able to make it sustainable. So we get questions about PON architecture in rural markets, and it's real key that I wanted to highlight that for those type of architectures, what is the most prevalent? Do you use like centralized symmetrical power splitting, or do you use distributed tap? I think that's really one of the big questions that we get from an outside plant's perspective. There's really those two approaches. Distributed taps are typically used in rural type applications like you see here. So that's the recommendation, you know, you're going to hear from many consultants and ourselves. And these are, the reason for that is it's more economical. It reduces the amount of cabling that you need, and of course the cost, right? It reduces the splicing overhead and making deployment faster, which again accelerates your time to market. And it also lowers the training costs from a technician perspective, right? Because a lot of these deployment strategies are similar to deployment strategies that have been put in, for example, in hybrid fiber coax networks and those type of networks. So really, it's important that you select and are aware of these distinctions as you deploy your outside plant. It's also a lot better to consider using taps for OLTs and so forth, and also consider when you're designing your outside plant and think about resiliency. One of the things I don't hear a lot of people talk about, but it's important to consider, is that by putting in this network, you're going to provide high availability from a network perspective to customers, or you're going to provide a network that's going to grow the economics of that area, and that network is going to grow. So you need to consider resiliency and so forth moving forward. So want to include things like high-level design information, logical fiber routes to minimize costs. You want to consider the environmental impact and work with your state and environmental groups and get those processes out early, and also analyze the right of way and streamline the permitting process to get this project going. Permitting sometimes delays projects for a long time. Many of you that have been in the building industry know about permitting, so it's important you get those processes early. The good thing is I know many states are accelerating this process and making it easier for you or for sub-guarantors to move forward as quickly as possible. So the key takeaway here is be prepared, work with your state and also local organizations and government entities and municipalities. Make sure you have a vision of where your network needs to go, and ask questions about for your consultants and designers about what technologies they're using to make it the most economically project moving forward. Next slide. Here's some additional considerations, and I talked about these earlier about rural deployments in terms of being able to reach subscribers. There are many technologies out there that only allow, because rural networks and reaching subscribers could require distances of 40 to 60 kilometers. You want to be careful and not just use the first technology you see. Some technologies can only get you to 20 kilometers. And you might say, well, I'll just deploy another one. But typically what happens there is now you have to deal with outside plant considerations, getting a hut and the permit for that hut, getting power to that hut, and also the footprint and property for that type of deployment. So you need to be very careful in terms of choosing what technologies you do as you start deploying these networks, to make sure that you find solutions that can reach the subscribers where they are from as much of a central location as possible, using the distributed tap approach I talked about earlier. And really the whole idea is to accelerate the time to market and make it more easily to do that. And then, as I spoke earlier, you want to institute technologies and think about your fiber route from the standpoint of being able to have a diversely routed, highly resilient network. That's also very important. And also being operationally efficient and making sure that you look at the project from a multi-year perspective in terms of where your resources are going to be deployed. One of the last things I'll mention here, which is very important, is you're going to be building out this network, let's say for the first 3 to 4 years, but one of the things, or longer, but you're going to be operating this for 15 years. So it's important to look at the operational considerations and making sure that as you start operating the network, you're not choosing technologies that are not efficient, and it's going to require most of your resources to focus on operations versus building out the network. That's another consideration to take. And then finally, one of the things that many people don't think about, but you might want to consider, is how you can be sustainable in terms of using less power and energy, as the costs of those are going to go up over year, as we've seen, and how you make sure that your network is sustainable and supports the lowest power uses and consumption as you roll it out. Next slide, Shapur. I wanted to quickly show here what is a BEAD-compliant network. You really want to focus on this resilient, flexible, comprehensive network that's end-to-end, and really focus on having this being your foundation for your business success. And as a BEAD-compliant network, you want to consider the design not just of the access part of the network, but also from the internet gateway all the way to the subscriber gateway. And the way we've looked at it and the way to think about it is that consists of the aggregation domain, simply the access domain, and the subscriber domain and the premises. And if you look at it that way, that'll make it a lot easier. Number one, you want to pick an aggregation technology that's going to deliver all the services and traffic, and it's going to be scalable as your business grows. And then the other one is you want to provide traffic segmentation and the ability to optimize the performance on that network. Especially as your community grows, you're going to have opportunities to serve businesses and so forth. And then finally, you want to look at the access domain. And as I mentioned before, pick technologies first. So you're going to be able to connect your subscribers for as few locations as possible. And then also pick technologies that allow you to extend that network out to connect those subscribers. It's very important. And if I look at this network is BEAD compliant, but the optical line terminal here in orange and the components at the ONT, those need to be Buy America compliant. And again, to make it easier, the vendors like Calix will provide those components for you and quote those components easily for you to make it easier to deploy them. And then finally, if the takeaway here is, again, select a comprehensive network that scales cost effectively. So let's take a look at one of the areas here that's very important, and that is the subscriber premise location. If you can go to the next slide, Shapur. One of the biggest questions we're asked about the waiver, if you look at the premise itself, you really have two options right now. You have a combined option or a separate system premise option. The combined option is really one system for both optical network terminal, which is the demarcation of the infrastructure, and the residential gateway wireless service or wireline service connectivity. And the advantage of that is you have one part, one system to physically install, and you have less installation costs. The separate system really separates the ONT, the termination point, from the residential gateway or the Wi-Fi system. And in that case, you do have some flexibility because you have this, what I would call the ONT is physically there. It's easier to optimize the Wi-Fi performance as you go along. It allows one ONT per location and really gives you independence in terms of upgrading the Wi-Fi technology over time, and really gives you the easy ability for the system to be swapped out and change. The challenge with this approach is that the Wi-Fi part of this network or the residential gateway is not covered by BEAD. So either you're going to have to pay for that for these low cost subscribers that you need to meet, or the other part is that you will have to charge the subscriber for that. So if you include that all together as part of your service using a combined solution, that would be the premise. And that would be something that we would recommend as you take a closer look to deploy this type of network. Next slide.
Hey Andre, this is really great information. Unfortunately, we need to cut to our second poll question. And Shapur, if you can go to that, and then Shapur will wrap it up on his side.
Okay.
All right. Hello, everybody. So yeah, second poll question. Which community service do you consider to be the most significant for your network to support? Is it public safety and first responders, schools and other educational institutions, healthcare facilities and telehealth, or small and medium business and local economies?
So while we're waiting for the information to come in, hey Andre, any closing thoughts before we shift over to Shapur's part?
Yeah, Greg, I wanted to quickly mention some of the cybersecurity needs, in terms of making sure that you, from an application standpoint, that you have a plan in place. That's really the important thing. Going back to, I think, the theme of the webinar is to focus on that and making sure that it's ready and operationalized. You have to submit a plan as part of your application, but it's important to also make sure that that plan is active and that it complies with the NIST cyber requirement framework. And you want to make sure that you reevaluate that plan. And the key takeaway is to make sure that the plan that all the stakeholders review, from the GM and your investors all the way down to the technicians and customer support people, and make sure that that plan is actionable and that you update that plan consistently. So thanks for sharing.
So cybersecurity plan, absolutely positively, very similar to the advanced ACAM for anybody who took that. And JSI and Calix work together and help you with that questionnaire. So certainly
Yeah,
certainly reach out to us.
I wanted to mention we do have Calix University has a cybersecurity certification course. You can go on our site and take a look, and it'll help you with how to build that cybersecurity plan.
All right. So now that we've explored the design and operational aspects of the BEAD-funded network, let's pivot into something just as critical, ensuring these networks not only connect communities, but also protect and empower them. BEAD is not just about providing connectivity, it's about building a stronger future for residences, businesses, and institutions alike. So let's dive into this topic a little bit further. So one of the most impactful ways your network can serve these priorities is a community-wide Wi-Fi network, or as we like to call them here at Calix, smart towns. So a smart town is more than just a place where broadband is available. It's a connected ecosystem where the network acts as a powerful tool to help residents, businesses, and organizations thrive. This concept aligns perfectly with the BEAD program's mission, connecting and protecting communities. So how does this help your BEAD application stand out, you might ask? Well, by showcasing how your network supports safety, education, economic growth, you create a compelling case for funding. Securing letters of support from schools, municipalities, and first responders highlights the tangible benefits your network provides, helping you differentiate yourself from the competition. So let's break this down a little bit further by looking at key groups these networks serve. So for residents, whether community-wide networks deliver private, secure, and safe Wi-Fi across the neighborhood, whether at home or in a park or at a public space. These residents have access to reliable connectivity that supports their everyday lives. Furthermore, we have local governments, municipal staff, and community associations. They all benefit from high-speed connectivity, allowing them to stay connected while on the move. This connectivity supports more efficient operations, better access to real-life field data, and faster response times for city services. Moving on, bridging the digital divide is a cornerstone for the BEAD program, and community-wide Wi-Fi networks achieve this by delivering pre-authorized content-safe internet to schools and students. So this ensures that educators can rely on secure tools for learning, while giving students the opportunities they need to thrive. Not to mention, students would have the same protection and connectivity outside the school as well. Last but definitely not least, and in fact, one of the most critical roles of community networks is enhancing public safety. So these networks provide critical connectivity where cellular service may be weak or oversaturated, enabling first responders such as police, fire, and EMS to operate without interruptions. So from real-time GPS tracking to reliable communication tools during emergencies, the simple fact is these networks save lives. So by including letters of support from organizations like schools, fire departments, and municipalities, your BEAD application demonstrates your network's value in adding real community needs, making your proposal stand out. This holistic approach is going to strengthen your application, making it a blueprint for not only connectivity, but also safety, education, and economic growth. All right. But these benefits, they don't stop at the community level, right? While your network is designed to transform entire towns, it also has an equally powerful role to play at the individual level as well. So subscriber needs have evolved significantly in the recent years, and your BEAD project has the potential to meet those needs by delivering enhanced security, convenience, and peace of mind where it matters most. So today's subscribers demand more than just fast internet speeds. They're looking for things like proactive cybersecurity and identity monitoring to safeguard their families and homes, self-monitoring cameras and access controls for increased security and convenience. And in my opinion, one of the most important is parental controls to protect children and vulnerable individuals from harmful online interactions. All right. So let's dive a little bit deeper into this and take a closer look at what a complete security ecosystem can deliver. So to kick things off, parents can manage and monitor their family's Wi-Fi experience, controlling who can access what and where. Families can view and secure their homes remotely, whether they're checking a delivery or ensuring their backyard is safe. Subscribers can feel confident that their in-home Wi-Fi experience and security extends seamlessly across their community as well, and also shields any children from cyberbullying or harmful online interactions, whether they're at home or at school. So with your networks, these priorities are no longer aspirations, right? They're realities. So providing the security and peace of mind to today's families need, all while reinforcing the community-focused goals of BEAD. So building community networks and enhancing home protection creates a win-win for BSPs, the communities they serve, and the broadband offices that are awarding MEAT funds. Integrating these smart networks does more than provide connectivity. It becomes a powerful tool for differentiation, growth, and resilience. First, offering a range of advanced services not only helps you attract more customers, but also increases your ARPU. While these value-added services also create new revenue streams while showcasing your network investment in the long-term success of your community. Second, promoting economic growth. Connected communities foster thriving economies by equipping them with the tools to attract new businesses, retain residents, and create job opportunities. Reliable, secure networks provide critical infrastructure for small businesses, telehealth, education, and other essential services. Third, strengthening community ties. These networks bring people together in meaningful ways, whether it's parents confidently monitoring their children's online activity, first responders communicating reliably during emergencies, or public Wi-Fi becoming a secure and accessible resource. Your network becomes a unifying force. So, and that's the ultimate goal of the BEAD program, right? Your project isn't just about closing the digital divide. It's about building a foundation for safer, smarter, and more connected future. So by emphasizing these community and household impacts in your BEAD application, you're not only just securing funding, but you're also creating a transformative legacy that benefits generations to come. And with that, I would like to end off with our final poll question. So it's pretty straightforward. Let us know if you'd be interested in consulting with a subject matter expert to assist you in your funding journey. So you can either request a funding consult, a BEAD network design consult, or generic BEAD or grant funding strategies. So let us know if you'd be interested, and we will be more than happy to get these calls set up and help you throughout your journey. All right, so give it a couple of seconds here.
Yeah, great. As people are answering the questions, I do want to go back to Andre, and one of the things that we didn't get to, a question about speed tests, performance tests. So as you know, in the past, the FCC had performance tests on the RDOF and ACAM projects. What is the performance test requirement for BEAD? And I could just, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I wasn't sure if you were asking me or, yeah, so I guess to keep it brief, what I wanted to mention is there is a speed test requirement, as mentioned before. The good thing is that the testing to the subscriber premise from a remote test server is available, but we already have a lot of service providers already doing speed testing, so there's a lot of initiatives already underway for service providers to set up systems for measuring this. But as we mentioned before, this is a challenging process, but really the key takeaway is to build testing into your network design up front, and leverage systems that support this speed testing so that you can comply with this obligation. And also stay informed because the rules do change, and make sure that the state may add additional requirements. So check with the state to make sure that that you can meet those requirements with your speed test regimen.
Okay, great. Amanda, quick question for you. There was a question on once the service provider signs a contract with the state that they have won, what's the typical time frame for building out?
Well, that's a good question. And supposedly their agencies have been working together. When you receive federal grant funding, you actually have to receive environmental clearance first. So that's your NEPA, SHPO, TIPO, if there's any BLM, all the agencies, all the letters, alphabet soup is what we call it. But you have to go through that process first and actually receive that approval. What we have been hearing from NTIA is that they are going to do categorical exclusions for this, which sounds really fun, and it sounds like you get out of this really quickly. But a categorical exclusion just means if you're going to put in your facilities in an existing right of way, they'll give you environmental clearance approval within 6 to 8 months versus the 1 to 2 years that it often takes.
Yeah, and they are looking to accelerate this process. I know all the states have been looking at that, so they are working hand in hand with the environmental group.
So the original NOFO, I believe, said 4 years, but do check with your state for specifics there. Hey, next question. This is kind of towards you, Andre. I went, the presentation on the BABA is fantastic. As far as where would customers go to see what the final list of items that need to be built in America for Calix?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, all the vendors are required to report that and provide that to the NTIA. Calix has a website, and we can share that.
And I just shared it. So.
Link, yeah, you can share that link. That'll be great. So you can go there, and that'll lead you to the Calix site, and you can follow on to the NTIA site if you need to.
Excellent, excellent. So, there was a question, will we send a recording? Absolutely, positively, yes. Last question is, there's a question specific to the different state programs. As Amanda was talking about, there's 56 states and territories, and each program's a little bit different, has different rules, have different dates. And Shapur, can you provide just some guidance on what tools are out there to help service providers look at these different schedules across the states and territories?
For sure. Yeah, most definitely. As a matter of fact, that's actually funny timing. We are in the process of deploying a new webpage where we are keeping track. It's kind of, you can think of it as a one-stop shop for everything to do with BEAD resources for each specific state. So essentially what it's going to look like is you can come in, you can select your state, and then you'll be presented with all the important documents, all the important resources, things like your initial proposal volume 2, your scoring rubrics, your timelines, webinar recordings, kind of everything around BEAD and the resources that their state broadband office provides. We compile it all into one website on the Calix page, which will be available very shortly. So I assume once we send out the link to the recording, we'll also probably most likely include a link to that state tracker as well for you guys to take a look at. But furthermore, I mean, even if you guys had any specific questions, you can feel free to reach out to any one of us on the panel as well, right? We're here to support you guys in your endeavors. And that's really our job, right? We like to help people. We like to help you solve problems. So don't hesitate to reach out if you'd rather have a more one-on-one personal question, or feel free to check out that resource that we're going to be that's going to be readily available soon. So I hope that answers the question, Greg.
No, perfect. And the attendees of this webinar have been extremely patient. We are 5 minutes over, but I do want to wish you a great day. And as Shapur said, and Amanda and Andre, just reach out to us. We're here to help. Thank you and have a great day.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Bye.